You know that phenomenon when you put a pot of water on the stove, and for the longest time, absolutely nothing seems to be happening.
Oh, yeah, like it's just sitting there.
Right. It just sits there completely flat. I mean, the water at 99 degrees looks virtually identical to the water at 50 degrees, but then you hit 100 degrees and the physics change entirely.
Yep, boiling point.
Exactly. Every single bubble decides to burst at the exact same millisecond. The whole system just, violently erupts into a totally new state.
Well, scientifically, it's a phase transition. The underlying energy was building the entire time, even when the surface looked totally calm. And when it finally breaks, the shift is sudden, chaotic, and pretty much irreversible.
And that concept, that phase transition, is exactly what we're looking at this week. I mean, we are staring down a global phase transition.
We really are.
I've been going through this massive stack of reports from the Daily Tech Reader, all dated Monday, July 13th, 2026. And the sheer convergence of events happening this very week is it's unprecedented.
It's a lot to process, yeah.
It is. Everything is centering around Tuesday, July 14th. We are talking about major global conflicts escalating, what is arguably the most concentrated economic week of the entire year, extreme weather breaking, century-old records, and historic sports moments all colliding at once.
A literal and figurative perfect storm.
Exactly. So the mission for this deep dive is to take all of these separate data points and connect the underlying mechanisms for you, because you really need to see how these pieces fit together.
Because when you have this many complex systems reaching critical mass simultaneously, the noise is just deafening.
Right.
So our goal today is to strip away that information overload. We need to look at the actual gears turning beneath the surface, to understand why a military strike halfway across the world, a tech company's quarterly earnings report, and a soccer match in Atlanta are all actively feeding into the exact same global pressure cooker that affects your daily life.
Yeah, and we have to start at the absolute epicenter of this week's tension, which is the rapidly deteriorating situation in the Middle East. And just as a quick note for you listening, before we get into the military movements, we are looking at highly charged geopolitical events here.
Definitely.
So our role is strictly to impartially report the facts as they are detailed in our source material. We aren't taking political sides. We are simply laying out the mechanics of what is actually happening so you can understand the broader landscape.
Which is essential because, honestly, the mechanics of this conflict are currently tangled in this massive web of contradictions.
Tangled is putting it mildly. I mean, overnight, CNTCOM, the United States Central Command, launched approximately 140 strikes on Iranian military targets.
That's a massive escalation.
It is. It represents the most intensive U.S. assault since hostilities resumed last week on July 8th. And in immediate retaliation, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, they declared the Strait of Hormuz closed. And they backed up that declaration by firing on Kuwaiti oil infrastructure and launching strikes on Qatar.
So the word closed is really the trigger here. You have to understand that the Strait of Hormuz isn't a physical door you can just lock.
Right, it's ocean.
Exactly. It's a critical maritime choke point between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman that handles, well, a massive percentage of the world's daily oil supply. But closing it doesn't always mean setting up some impenetrable wall of warships. Often, the mechanism of closure is purely financial.
Meaning the insurance companies are the ones actually dropping the gates.
Precisely. If a maritime insurance syndicate in London decides the risk of a missile strike is just too high, they jack up the insurance premiums on these multi-million-dollar oil tankers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and if the premium hits a certain percentage of the hull's value, shipping companies simply refuse to sail. So the strait becomes effectively closed by fear and financial mathematics long before a physical blockade is even complete.
But the narrative of what is actually happening on the water right now is totally fractured. Like, you have the IRGC claiming the southern Hormuz shipping corridor is shut.
Right.
But then the U.S. Navy's Joint Maritime Information Center steps up and insists the southern Omaha-hugging route remains fully open for two-way traffic. Yet, at the exact same time, the government of Qatar is officially advising all vessels to temporarily suspend sailing entirely.
It's a mess.
So if the U.S. military says it's safe, but a regional power says, don't sail, who actually controls the reality of global shipping in this scenario?
Well, the reality on the water is dictated by risk tolerance. A commercial shipping CEO doesn't navigate based on press releases.
That makes sense.
If there are active missiles in the airspace, and Qatar, which is a massive logistical hub, is waving a red flag, commercial traffic just halts. The U.S. Navy can declare the water open all at once, but if the civilian captains refuse to enter the corridor, the market treats the strait as closed.
And the diplomatic channels operating in the background of all this are just as bizarre. I mean, despite 140 U.S. strikes and Iranian attacks on regional infrastructure, both sides are signaling that they still want to negotiate.
Which seems completely counterintuitive.
Right. U.S. officials are claiming technical talks remain open. Iranian Foreign Minister Arachi just flew to Muscat for meetings. Pakistan and Qatar are actively mediating to try and salvage the June 17th Memorandum of Understanding framework.
Yeah.
Oman has even drafted a brand new shipping traffic proposal to manage the dispute. It is literally like two neighbors threatening to burn down the entire city block while simultaneously slipping polite negotiation notes under each other's doors.
That's a great analogy. It really highlights how multidimensional modern conflict is. No one wants the catastrophic economic fallout of a total regional war, so they keep the diplomatic back channels alive even while they're trading military blows.
Right.
But that June 17th milieu they're trying to save is incredibly fragile. That agreement called for an end to hostilities on all fronts. And Iran is now claiming that Israel's continued airstrikes in southern Lebanon over the weekend, which reportedly killed 2 people, are a direct violation of that milieu. So the diplomatic puzzle has all these external moving pieces across multiple borders.
Yet the most critical piece of the puzzle might be the one that is completely invisible.
You mean the internal leadership of Iran?
Exactly. Iran has a newly designated supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, and since his appointment, he has not made a single public appearance. He has basically vanished from the public eye at the exact moment the region is on fire.
That's highly unusual.
It is. I have to challenge the standard interpretation of that absence, though. The UN Secretary General is warning of catastrophic consequences because of this opacity. But could that silence actually be a deliberate weapon, like strategic ambiguity?
Oh, is it?
Yeah. By refusing to speak or appear in public, he forces the U.S. military, the diplomats in Oman, and the global markets to constantly guess what his actual red lines are.
That is a very compelling read of the situation. Strategic ambiguity forces your opponents to act cautiously because they just don't know the rules of engagement. But it is a double-edged sword.
How so?
When the decision-making apparatus of a major global power is completely silent, the risk of a miscalculation absolutely skyrockets. If Washington or Jerusalem guesses wrong about where Iran's red lines actually are, the retaliation could be massive. And the markets despise ambiguity above all else.
Which brings us directly to how this impacts the person listening to this right now. You might not be charting a tanker through the Gulf of Oman, but this geopolitical ambiguity is crashing directly into your wallet.
Absolutely.
Because this week is shaping up to be the most critical economic week of 2026. We are heading straight into what analysts are calling Monster Tuesday.
The timing honestly couldn't be worse for the global economy. The uncertainty in the Strait of Hormuz acts as an immediate regressive tax on everything we buy.
The raw numbers are alarming. Brent crude oil spiked on Sunday morning immediately following Iran's closure declaration. Energy analysts are warning that if this financial blockade is sustained, it could sharply reverse the recent easing trends we've seen at the pump.
Which no one wants.
Right. It could potentially push Brent crude back toward the wartime high of nearly $120 a barrel that we saw back in March.
Which means the cost of transporting every single consumer good goes up overnight.
We are already seeing the pressure. Right now, the national average for a gallon of gas is holding at $3.88. That is 70 cents higher than it was a year ago.
Yeah.
But the analysts in our reports warn that this Hormuz escalation could push the average past the May high of $4.56. Meanwhile, gold broke above $4,130 an ounce as institutional investors just scramble to park their cash in a safe haven.
They're looking for anywhere safe to hide.
Exactly. And all of this geopolitical and commodity chaos is colliding with the Tuesday docket that is almost too massive to process.
The earnings and data drops scheduled for Tuesday morning are staggering.
Yeah, before the opening bell even rings, 5 major banks are reporting their Q2 earnings. We're talking JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup.
The heavyweights.
All eyes are specifically on JP Morgan. The consensus EPS, or earnings per share, which is essentially the bank's profit divided by its outstanding shares, is expected to be $5.44. Now, that is up 10% year over year, but importantly, it is a drop from the $5.94 they posted in Q1. Analysts are going to be dissecting their net interest margins to the decimal point.
And we should probably explain why net interest margins matter to the average listener.
Please do.
So that margin is basically the difference between the interest a bank earns on the loans it gives out and the interest it pays out to you for keeping your deposits there. When that margin shrinks, it often signals that banks are having to pay more to keep customer cash or that consumers are taking out fewer loans.
It's like a canary in the coal mine.
Exactly. It is a direct pulse check on the financial health of the American consumer. Furthermore, the market will be hanging on every single word of CEO Jamie Dimon's macro guidance because JP Morgan has visibility into the spending habits of millions of credit cards. They know exactly how much pain inflation is causing.
And inflation is the other massive shadow hanging over Tuesday. Because on the exact same morning, the June Consumer Price Index drops. We get the raw data on exactly how fast prices are rising.
Right.
And as if that wasn't enough, Federal Reserve Chair Kevin Warsh is giving his first ever congressional testimony. Money markets are already aggressively pricing in a quarter-point rate hike for September because they expect Warsh to be hawkish, meaning he is prioritizing fighting inflation, even if it means slowing down economic growth.
He's ready to hit the brakes.
So wait. I have to hit pause here because I know anyone listening is feeling the same severe whiplash I am.
Oh, I'm sure.
We have a potential global crisis in the Middle East. Gas prices threatening to spike to $4.50, sticky inflation data, and a Fed chair ready to raise interest rates. Yet our sources show the S&P 500 just posted its fourth winning week in 5.
I know, it sounds crazy.
The NASDAQ actually gained 1.7% on the week. How does the stock market go up when the world is apparently boiling over?
It looks completely detached from reality until you look at the mechanics of how these market indexes are actually constructed.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the S&P 500 is market cap weighted. That means the biggest companies have an outsized impact on the index's overall direction. The broader traditional economy is absolutely feeling the weight of this geopolitical dread.
Right.
If you look at the Dow Jones, which is much more reliant on traditional industrial and energy companies, it underperformed and shed 0.5% on the week. Those companies are highly sensitive to supply chain chaos and inflation. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ are being kept afloat by one specific life raft.
Artificial intelligence?
Exactly. Artificial intelligence.
The concentration of wealth there is just wild. Wall Street is projecting that overall Q2 earnings growth will be above 20% for the second straight quarter. But here's the catch. AI-related companies, specifically hardware giants like NVIDIA and Micron, are projected to drive 40% of the entire S&P 500's profit expansion.
That's a huge chunk.
It is. 40% of the market's growth is coming from just a handful of AI leaders.
And the mechanism driving that profit is CapEx, or capital expenditure. Every other major corporation on Earth is just terrified of being left behind in the AI revolution, so they were pouring billions of dollars into buying infrastructure and chips from these few companies.
Just shoveling money at them.
Right. Investors look at the chaos in the Middle East, they look at rising interest rates, and they decide that AI is the only growth engine powerful enough to outrun the macroeconomic headwinds. When ASML and Taiwan Semiconductor report later this week, we will likely see even more money flood into that specific sector. AI has effectively become its own insulated economy.
It creates a fascinating split-screen effect. I mean, on one side, AI is practically printing money by selling the promise of the future. But on the other side of the screen, you have yesterday's tech darlings, the streaming giants who are suddenly really struggling with the present.
Oh, the contrast between the AI boom and the streaming industry's internal panic is one of the most telling stories of the week.
Let's look at Netflix. They report earnings this Thursday alongside legacy companies like United Health and GE Aerospace. Netflix shares are currently down 22% year-to-date. And the Wall Street Journal just reported that Netflix executives are actively exploring a pivot back to live television channels.
It's wild.
Live TV. They are so concerned about declining user engagement that they are considering a 1990s broadcast model.
The irony there is just thick, especially considering what just happened during award season.
Unbelievably thick. Because Thursday also brought the Emmy nominations, and streaming dominance was absolute. Apple TV+, HBO, and Netflix claim the overwhelming majority of the top category slots across drama, comedy, and limited series.
This swept it.
They really did. Meanwhile, traditional broadcast networks hit their lowest combined nomination totals in the history of the Emmys. So Netflix essentially conquered the entertainment world, completely killed broadcast TV at the Emmys, and now they are so worried about keeping human attention on their platform that they are trying to reinvent cable.
It exposes a fundamental vulnerability in the tech landscape. Consumer habits fracture incredibly fast. A company can utterly dominate its sector, win every critical award, and destroy its legacy competition. But if the core algorithm stops generating engagement, the stock plunges, 22%.
It's ruthless.
It is. People are overwhelmed by the endless paradox of choice on streaming platforms. AI is driving 40% of market profits today, but streaming was the untouchable darling just a few years ago. It proves that absolutely no sector is immune to gravity.
And that desperate hunt for live appointment viewing engagement actually provides a perfect bridge to the back half of our sources. Because the one thing that algorithms can't replicate is the raw, unscripted stakes of live human competition.
Right. You can't script it.
The very thing driving historic, record-breaking live TV audiences this week is happening right now, and it's taking place against a backdrop of literal, life-threatening environmental extremes.
The World Cup semifinals.
Yes, the matchups for this week are locked. Tuesday, adding to the chaos of Monster Tuesday, we have France versus Spain in Dallas. Wednesday, it is England versus Argentina in Atlanta. Fox and Telemundo are reporting that U.S. viewership is on track to shatter every media record in the books.
It's huge.
The Saturday doubleheader already drew the largest combined Saturday soccer audience in U.S. television history.
And you have to remember, the matches required to reach this stage were grueling battles of attrition.
They were brutal. I mean, France systematically beat Morocco 2-0. Spain edged out Belgium 2-1 with an 88th minute winner by Marino. Then you had England surviving Norway 2-1 in extra time.
That Norway game was intense.
Oh, Norway's shoulder-up scored first with a dipping shot that totally deceived the keeper, Pickford. But Jude Bellingham scored a brace, which, for those who don't know, is just soccer terminology for 2 goals in one game. He tied it before halftime and hit the winner in extra time.
Yeah, he saved them.
He did. And even after advancing, England's manager, Thomas Tuchel, was furious. He called the victory lucky and publicly chided his own team for executing sloppy tactics.
But the tactical breakdown in that match wasn't just poor discipline, though.
No, and we'll get to exactly why in a second, because Argentina also barely survived, outlasting a 10-man Switzerland 3-1 in extra time. McAllister got an early header, Switzerland tied it, and then Switzerland's Embolo got a red card. So Switzerland is playing a man down, and they just parked the bus, defending for their absolute lives to force extra time.
Just holding on.
Right. Argentina was exhausted and had to rely on Alvarez hitting a curling 112th minute golazo, a spectacular goal just to break the deadlock, before Martinez sealed it with a stoppage time rebound dagger.
Yeah.
But the most important variable in all of these matches wasn't the formations.
No, not at all.
It is the fact that these teams are playing the biggest matches of their lives in Dallas and Atlanta, right as a historic secondary summer heat dome spreads across the entire country.
The physiological reality of this weather system cannot be overstated.
The extremes we are seeing are terrifying. Billings, Montana, is forecasted to hit 110 degrees for the first time in 92 years of record keeping. Salt Lake City is nearing its 107-degree all-time high.
It's suffocating.
And this massive heat dome is moving east. It hit the Midwest on Monday, and it is projected to smother the Northeast and the heavily populated I-95 corridor with near 100-degree temperatures by Wednesday. So we are watching athletes attempt peak human performance inside a literal pressure cooker. How much does an extreme physical environment like that dictate the outcome of these global events?
It dictates the entire paradigm. I mean, physiology ultimately limits strategy. When you ask athletes to play a 120-minute soccer match in extreme heat indices, the brain's hypothalamus goes into overdrive trying to cool the body.
Right, it's just trying to survive.
Exactly. It starts pulling blood away from the muscles and organs, directing it to the skin to sweat. As the core temperature rises past 101 or 102 degrees, cognitive function degrades rapidly.
Wow.
And that is exactly why Thomas Tuchel was complaining about sloppy tactics. His players physically lost the neurological ability to execute complex tactical formations. Elite athletes are reduced to raw survival instincts.
That physiological breakdown is such a perfect mirror for the rest of the week, because if we zoom out, everything we have discussed today is operating under the exact same dynamic. The system is under maximum pressure, and the heat degrades rational strategy.
The parallels are striking, really. The soccer players in Atlanta and Dallas are pushing their bodies to the brink in record heat, causing tactical errors. The diplomats in Oman are sweating through tense negotiations, trying to stop a regional conflict from closing a maritime choke point before a miscalculation triggers a war.
Yeah.
The traders on Wall Street are bracing for 5 major bank earnings, CPI inflation data, and a hawkish Fed, all dropping on the exact same morning, while oil threatens to spike to $120.
Every single participant in this global system is operating inside a pressure cooker right now.
And when the pressure gets that high, the margin for error drops to absolute zero.
Yep.
One sloppy pass in extra time leads to an elimination. One miscalculated drone strike in the Gulf triggers a regional war. One overly aggressive sentence from Fed Chair Warsh regarding interest rates, and the entire algorithmic trading system reacts violently.
We are back to your opening thought. The water is at 99 degrees. The phase transition is imminent. It is an absolute whirlwind of a week. For you listening, just to summarize the sheer scale of the convergence on the horizon, you have the threat of $120 oil potentially spiking your local gas prices back to $4.50. You've got Jamie Dimon and the biggest banks in the world setting the tone for the global economy on a Tuesday morning that also features critical inflation data and Federal Reserve testimony.
Right.
You have the raw athleticism of Jude Bellingham and Julian Alvarez on the pitch, fighting through 110-degree heat domes that are smashing century-old climate records. It is a massive amount of data to process.
It is deeply complex, and as we look at how all these threads intertwine, I'm going to leave you with a final, lingering question to consider this week.
Let's hear it.
We just discussed how artificial intelligence is now expected to drive 40% of our entire stock market's profit growth. We've seen how algorithms and tech giants are so desperate to capture our fracturing attention that they are reverting to legacy television models. And, perhaps most impactfully, we've seen how the stability of the global economy and world peace might be hanging on the strategic ambiguity of a newly appointed, entirely silent supreme leader in Iran.
Yeah.
So, looking at all of these massive opaque systems, how much of our daily reality is actually within our own control? And how much were we all just passengers sitting in the pressure cooker waiting for the next catalyst to make the bubbles burst?
And that is a heavy, heavy thought to carry into a Tuesday. But asking those exact kinds of questions is why we do this show. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay cool out there, keep a close eye on those markets, and we'll catch you on the next one.